You know, when it comes to you and TNA, Loki, we can start literally at the very beginning because you were involved in the very first match at the very first TNA event nearly 13 years ago. Isn't that amazing when you look back on something like that?
A long time ago, yeah.
What are your memories of that first day, first night with TNA?
Well, my memories from that first day were, I remember coming into a new environment, something that I wasn't quite familiar with, and I sure wasn't quite familiar with the competitors. And I didn't quite know what to expect. At the same time, coming out of New York, young and hungry, I didn't care. I came to win. I came to make myself known on a national stage, and, you know, that was the time for it.
Let's talk about some of those competitors. You were involved in not only the first event, but the very first match. Your tag team partners, AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn. And you know, as you look back and reflect on that, at least I do, I say, we're looking at the three guys who were the cornerstones of the X Division.
Yeah.
Talk about AJ and Jerry Lynn.
Well, in regards to AJ and Jerry Lynn, I think at that time, Jerry Lynn having the more experience than AJ and I, AJ having more athletic ability out of the three of us, and me being the most aggressive. I think what we did was we fed off of each other's energy very well. And we were able to establish that pure skill would speak for us. And I think with that opportunity off of that very first event, I think that was the starting point of creating a new identity and eventually it becoming the X Division.
Let's talk about the derivation of your name. What does it come from? Really, what does it mean to you, the name Loki?
Well, just like many other wrestlers, trying to look for an identity, a professional identity. It was difficult at first because I didn't know exactly the whole process of it, but I needed something that I felt was true to who I was. And this was 97, I believe. Yeah, 1997. I remember listening to the radio, and for some reason, a lyric had caught me. And it came from this song by the group named Blackstreet called No Diggity. And for some reason, the lyric that was said was very low-key on the profile. And to me, it really just, it caught my attention very strongly because I don't enter a room and warrant, you know, a lot of attention. I'm a very passive person until the bell rings. But in that instance of trying to find a true identity, that caught my attention, and it's been with me ever since.
You know, when I think back to that first ever TNA event, I remember a conversation that you and I had, getting some background information on you that I could present to the viewers. And the thoughts that I had coming away from that talk with you, I said to myself, this guy is serious, this guy is driven, and just from the conversation, I came to the conclusion that you were going to be successful. I just really felt that at the time, and it's one of those moments that, you know, that you remember when you fast forward 13 years and just thinking about the amazing career that you've had.
Yeah, it's definitely been a long road, that's for sure. And just, again, being unfamiliar with that territory, going in just as young and hungry. I think that's one of the defining elements of a lot of competitors. How hungry are you? I came in starving, and I had to seize the opportunity. And I did it the old-fashioned way, hard work. There's no other way around it. That's the only way that I could succeed. So that's what I did.
You know, when I also think back to those early conversations, the one thing that stuck with me was the fact that you had a goal outside of wrestling just for TNA, outside of wrestling in the United States, and that goal was to wrestle in Japan.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, once I had watched you in action, I thought, this is an absolute perfect fit with your style and the Japanese strong style. Look back on that, boy, that's really an amazing part of your resume, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where I wanted to really test my skill, because growing up, my motivation wasn't what traditional wrestlers aim for. My I wanted to test my limits and test my skill against some of the most brutal and aggressive competitors on the planet. And Japan was the place to do so. And me being at the size that I am, by comparison to those competitors, I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me, but I had to get started early. And again, it seems to be just like everyone else. You're a product of your environment. I came from a rough environment. I had to be aggressive. I had to be hungry, and I had to work my butt off in order to be a success to get out of that environment. In order for me to reach Japan, I knew I had to be at a certain level of performance, a certain level of mental toughness. So when the opportunity presented itself, although I was a part of TNA at the time, my dream was calling, and I needed to answer that call.
And you succeeded in Japan for several companies, whether it was 01, whether it was Noah, whether it was New Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, you went over to Japan and became a champion, immediate success, because I think that the promotions over there realized that you were a perfect fit for them. I mean, tell us about those days and the opportunities that you had to move from company to company.
Well, when it began, it was 2002, September of 2002, and I thought it was a very unique situation because I was able to go to Japan to compete several days after my birthday. So to me, that was more of a birthday gift. And I remember the first day being there, I had to spar with every member of the trainee camp. And I submitted all of them in front of Fujiwara. And the last one I almost put in the hospital. And I had Shinya Hashimoto, who was the boss, come in and tell me, maybe only 70%. Because I knew the history of competing in Japan, they're always gonna test you. But if you put them in their place, and not in a disrespectful way, but for them to acknowledge that you are prepared to compete, they will give you that respect and back off a bit. So me being at my size, again, I'm still one of the relatively small competitors in this type of environment. To go over there and go with the ferocity that I went, I think I raised a lot of eyebrows, and it led to a lot of my success.
You brought up Fujiwara, you brought up Shinya Hashimoto. I think of matches that you had with people like Jushin Thunder Liger,
Yeah.
Tiger Mask, Kenta Kobashi.
Oof.
Well, you look back, and I guess I know it's a dream come true,
Yeah.
but to hear your reaction right there, I know that that's also something where you know that going in, you're paying a physical price.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember being in the ring the first time with Kenta Kobashi. And again, you think you're tough until someone comes along and hits you so hard that they can sweep you off your feet. I had never been hit like that until that moment. And I remember it was Bison Smith and I against Kenta Kobashi and Kenta. And I remember Kobashi hitting me with that chop that he's legendary for. And again, I had never been hit so hard that I was swept off of my feet. I remember taking the shot and blinking because of the impact and looking at Bison and just going, ho, 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 like this, because I was so surprised by it. But at the same time, I knew that was my welcoming into Noah.
Let's talk about one of your trainers that people watching TNA are very familiar with. Let's talk about Homicide.
Yes, sir. Homicide. First time I met him, 1997. He came to our training facility where we were at St. John the Baptist Church in Brooklyn. And my cousin and I, who was also wrestling, we were trying to come up with something cool as far as like what to call ourselves. So we were calling ourselves the Hit Squad. You know, we figured, hey, we're from Brooklyn, we're coming in hard. So, cool. Homicide catches wind of that. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna find out who these boys are. Within the first minute of the match, I almost bit my tongue off, or of training with him in the ring. I almost bit my tongue clear off. I had 4 deep puncture holes going from right to left. And I rolled out of the ring. And I remember spitting out the blood and looking at it. And I mean, you saw how I react to blood. So I looked at my blood, and I got back in the ring and tried to break his arm. So after all of that ended, he said, you know, this is the first time I've been in the ring with guys who didn't complain. I want you guys with me.
Let's transition to a different company, a different style. Let's talk about your time in the WWE. You were the winner of season 2 of NXT.
Yes.
What kind of memories do you have from that period of your career?
Bittersweet, because I knew the opportunity that was there, understanding the environment that is existing there. And, you know, despite whatever may have happened, my training and the teaching that I had received was always in application. I always used it, which was continue to work hard. It will be recognized. You know, the cream always rises to the top. So despite the circumstances I was placed in, even at one point, somebody in management telling me that there was no mathematical way for me to lose simply because I had engulfed over 60% of the votes for the entire season. My skill was being recognized by the audience. And that I took pride in, because I didn't have to go out there and talk a whole bunch. I didn't have to go out there and try to be something that I wasn't. I understood the circumstances that they were putting me in. I was trying to adapt to them, but at the same time, in that environment, they didn't want me there to begin with. And I understood that, because I know that guys of my size and skill are looked down upon in that environment. And it has no bearing on anyone else but whoever's on top. So, you know, I understood going in there because I had plenty of people that I knew who were already there or had been there to warn me. I had the world experience on understanding what I was getting myself into. But the bottom line is, once the bell rings, that's all you. And so if you're meant to be in there, show it.
Loki is totally focused on bringing success to the BDC.